The sound of the blast echoed through the ship's hull, vibrating in the walls and flooring like a drumbeat to the rhythm of chaos. Captain Axel Cole braced himself against the steel railing of the observation deck, his gloved hands tightening as the ship rocked beneath him. Outside the viewport, debris scattered in the dark vacuum of space, remnants of a battle, just another day in the endless war against the galaxy's criminal underworld. The Steel Dagger, his ship, groaned in protest, its systems buckling from the enemy's assault. It wasn't the first time he'd been in a firefight like this, but this time felt different. There was an air of finality in the way the ship moved, as if even the universe knew this was not going to end well. "Captain, incoming transmission." The voice of his first officer, Kara Drake, crackled through the intercom. Axel, his dark eyes narrowing in irritation, approached the command station. "Patch it through, Kara." The screen flickered to life, displaying a face Axel knew all too well, a face that haunted his every dream, and every nightmare. Zora Vex, the galaxy's most dangerous woman. A bounty hunter, a mercenary, and the leader of the infamous Crimson Syndicate. She was the one who had sworn to kill him years ago, after their disastrous encounter on the planet Lyris. He had betrayed her, left her to rot in a prison cell, and somehow managed to escape with his life. But he hadn't escaped unscathed. Zora's vengeance was a force he couldn't outrun. "You didn't think you could outrun me forever, Cole," her voice oozed with venom, a sharp contrast to the smug smile that curled on her lips. The woman in the screen was as beautiful as she was terrifying, long silver hair framing a face that could melt hearts and tear them apart with equal ferocity. Her violet eyes gleamed with both malice and amusement, a hunter toying with her prey. "Zora," Axel muttered under his breath, clenching his fists. "You should have stayed dead." Her laughter was chilling, as if she were toying with the very idea of his fear. "Stay dead? Oh, Axel, you really don't understand, do you? You're not getting away this time. I've been tracking you for months. You think a few weapons on your precious ship will stop me?" Axel's pulse quickened, the adrenaline flooding his veins. There were no more tricks left, no more plans. His entire fleet had been wiped out. The Steel Dagger was the last ship in his armada, and Zora's forces were closing in. But as the view from the observation deck showed Zora's fleet advancing, something unexpected happened. Zora's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. She leaned closer to the screen, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that could only be described as possessive. "Tell me something, Cole," she purred, her voice low and dangerous. "Have you ever wondered why I'm still here? Why I haven't just blown you to pieces yet?" Axel felt a chill slide down his spine. He wasn't ready for the truth, but somehow, he already knew what she was going to say. "Because, Axel," Zora continued, her tone shifting from malicious to something almost affectionate, "I've been hunting you for years because you belong to me. No one else will have you. Not when you're the one who made me this way." Axel's stomach turned. He opened his mouth to protest, but the words caught in his throat. "You were my enemy," he finally managed, his voice rough. "I didn't want anything to do with you." She smirked. "And yet, you're the one who kissed me. You're the one who pushed me into that cell and left me to die, only to come crawling back later to beg for forgiveness." Axel's mind was racing. The memory flashed before him. He had crossed paths with Zora years ago, in the dark underbelly of the galaxy, on a mission that had gone terribly wrong. A kiss, an act of desperation, had sealed both their fates. Now, it seemed to be the key to an obsession neither of them could escape. "You're insane," Axel spat, his chest heaving with anger and disbelief. Zora chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down his spine. "Maybe. But that doesn't change anything. You see, Axel, after everything we've been through, the only thing left is this. You. Me. And an entire galaxy watching us burn." Her words hung in the air like a poison. Zora Vex wasn't just a bounty hunter anymore, she was something darker, something he had never anticipated. His every instinct screamed at him to run, to escape, but Zora's grip on him was inescapable. She had planted herself into his mind and soul, like a parasite, and now, there was no way out. "Your fleet is gone," Axel said through gritted teeth. "You won. Now, leave me the hell alone." She tilted her head, as if considering his words. Then she leaned closer to the screen, and for a moment, her smile faltered. "I don't think you understand," Zora whispered, her voice soft, almost tender. "This isn't about winning anymore. It's about what's between us. You're my mate, Axel. Whether you like it or not." The word hit him like a physical blow. Mate? It felt like the world had shifted beneath him. The term was foreign, not just in the sense of language, but in the context of their history, their rivalry, and their tumultuous relationship. She was talking about something far beyond enemies, beyond war. "You're insane," Axel repeated, his mind struggling to process the words. Zora's smile returned, more predatory than before. "We've been at war for so long, Axel, that we've forgotten what we are to each other. I made you my enemy, and now I'm making you my partner. Whether you want it or not." Axel took a step back, the ground beneath him seeming to tremble with the weight of her words. "You've lost your mind." She reached forward, her fingers brushing the edge of the screen, a strange, almost affectionate gesture. "Maybe. But I know one thing for sure. You can't run from me anymore. I will have you, Axel. You'll either accept it, or I'll make you." The screen flickered, and then the connection was cut. Axel stood frozen in place, his breath shallow and his thoughts a mess. Zora had once been his greatest enemy, now, she was something far worse. She was a force he couldn't escape, and worse still, she was right. He couldn't outrun her forever. And the idea of becoming her mate, a bond that went deeper than anything he had ever known, was something Axel couldn't even begin to comprehend. But in the back of his mind, the whisper of a truth lingered, maybe he never had been able to escape her. And now, with nowhere to go and nowhere to hide, he was going to have to face the galaxy's most dangerous woman on her terms. Axel Cole sat alone in the dimly lit command center of the Steel Dagger, staring at the swirling void of space outside the viewport. His mind raced with the words Zora had spoken to him, her voice lingering in his thoughts like a toxin. "Mate," she had said. The word echoed through his skull, pounding against his temples with each passing second. It wasn't just a term of endearment. It wasn't just some cruel mockery of their chaotic history. It was a declaration, a reality he couldn't escape. He had made enemies in his life, plenty of them. Powerful people, ruthless warlords, and dangerous criminals. But none of them had ever looked at him with the kind of certainty that Zora did. She wasn't just threatening to kill him, she was threatening to bind him to her in a way that made his blood run cold. As the captain of the Steel Dagger, he was used to danger. He thrived on it. But this? This was different. This was personal. He rubbed his temples, trying to push aside the weight of Zora's words. His hand rested on the cold metal surface of the command console, his fingers tapping absent-mindedly as the stars outside drifted by, indifferent to the chaos unfolding within the ship's hull. "Captain," Kara Drake's voice broke through the silence, her tone filled with quiet urgency. "We've got a problem." Axel looked up at the screen, where Kara appeared, her face flickering with the usual calm composure she maintained. But there was something in her eyes, something that told him this wasn't just another skirmish with space pirates. Something far more dangerous was on the horizon. "What is it, Kara?" he asked, his voice hoarse from hours of tension. She hesitated for a moment before speaking, as if considering how to break the news. "It's Zora's fleet. They've initiated a full lockdown of our navigation systems. She's already hacked into our communications and bypassed every security measure we've put in place. We're dead in the water unless we make a move. Axel cursed under his breath. I knew she wouldn't just go away. She's a damn ghost. She's more than that, Captain, Kara said, her voice quieter now. We've underestimated her before. She's relentless. And now she's close enough to board us. Axel's jaw clenched. The cold, calculated way she'd spoken earlier, it wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war, but this time, it wasn't just between enemies. Zora was playing a game, and Axel was trapped in the center of it. We've got to fight back, he said, standing up from his chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Prepare the fighters. We're not just going to roll over for her. Not now. Kara nodded. Aye, Captain. But you should be prepared. I don't think it's going to be a simple firefight. Zora is more unpredictable than we give her credit for. Axel walked toward the window, staring at the dark void ahead. His mind was swirling with thoughts of her, Zora Vex, the woman who had vowed to destroy him years ago, and the woman who had just admitted that she wanted him as something more. His pulse quickened. That kiss, that moment of madness in the prison cell, wasn't just a moment of weakness. It had changed something in her, in both of them. He had no idea how she could shift so quickly from an enemy to a supposed mate. But somehow, he couldn't deny that there was a part of him that was drawn to her in a way he couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was because she understood him, the way she seemed to know his every move before he made it. Or maybe it was because she held the power to destroy everything he had built, and that kind of power was intoxicating. Axel swallowed hard, pushing the thoughts aside. He couldn't afford to be distracted by emotions. Not now. Captain, Kara's voice crackled again, pulling him from his thoughts. They've initiated a boarding sequence. Zora's boarding party is en route. We need to act fast. Axel straightened, his mind sharpening. You heard her. Let's show her what happens when you mess with the wrong ship. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Kara and Axel coordinated the defense, pulling every resource they had to fight off Zora's relentless assault. The Steel Dagger's crew moved quickly and efficiently, working like a well-oiled machine despite the chaos that had enveloped them. Axel couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as the crew scrambled to their posts, preparing for the worst. In the background, alarms blared, signaling the breach of their hull. It wasn't long before they saw Zora's forces flooding through the corridors, masked soldiers in black tactical suits, armed with high-powered plasma rifles and advanced weaponry. Axel's heart hammered in his chest. He knew the stakes. If Zora's forces took control of the ship, it would be the end. Not just for him, but for the entire crew. Go, go, go! Axel shouted, his voice cutting through the panic. We hold them off here. The battle for control of the Steel Dagger began in earnest. Blaster fire rang out, punctuated by the hum of energy shields, as Axel and his crew fought tooth and nail to repel the intruders. It wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle for dominance, for control of their future. But as the fight raged on, Axel's thoughts were divided. In the midst of all the chaos, there was a part of him that couldn't shake the thought of Zora. The woman he had betrayed, the woman who had sworn vengeance, was now standing at his doorstep, and despite everything, he felt a pull toward her. A force he couldn't explain. Her voice echoed in his mind. I will have you, Axel. You're mine. Axel pushed the thought away. There was no time for distractions. Kara moved up beside him, her rifle aimed steady as she fired at a group of Zora's soldiers who had breached the eastern corridor. They're relentless, she gritted, wiping a smear of blood from her cheek. But we're holding them off for now. We need to get to the engine room before they lock us down completely. Axel nodded. Lead the way. We'll cover you. Together, they fought their way to the engine room, but every step brought them closer to the inevitable confrontation. Axel could feel it in the air, the anticipation, the electric tension that built with each passing moment. And somewhere, beyond the hull of the ship, Zora was waiting. Watching. Calculating. Axel's mind raced. There was no escaping her. She was closing in, and no matter how hard he fought, no matter how many battles he won, she was always one step ahead. It wasn't just a matter of survival anymore. It was a matter of surrender. The battle within the steel dagger had reached a boiling point. The corridors were filled with the sounds of war, clashing weapons, the hum of energy shields, and the echo of boots against metal floors as Zora's forces advanced. Axel could feel the tension thick in the air, almost suffocating him. The crew fought valiantly, but the odds were stacked against them. Zora's forces were relentless, a well-trained group of mercenaries that could adapt faster than any human army. Axel and Kara had successfully reached the engine room, but the fight was far from over. They had to get the ship's systems back online and prevent Zora's forces from completely taking over. If they didn't act fast, it would only be a matter of time before Zora herself boarded the ship, and Axel wasn't sure he was ready to face her, especially after the conversation they'd had. His heart still raced from her words. "You're mine," she had said. And even though he hated the idea, there was something about it that sent an electric shock through his body. The pull was undeniable. There was a bond between them, a dangerous, twisted bond that Axel wasn't sure he could break. "Captain, we need to lock down the engine systems," Kara said, her voice sharp, pulling him from his thoughts. Her gaze was focused, determined. "If we don't get the engines running, we're sitting ducks." Axel nodded, his fingers flying over the console, trying to bypass Zora's locks and regain control of the ship. His mind was running through 1,000 scenarios, each one more harrowing than the last. He needed to hold on just a little longer. "Systems are almost back online," Axel muttered, sweat trickling down his forehead as he worked. The engine room lights flickered ominously. "Just need a few more seconds." A loud explosion shook the ship, knocking Axel to the ground. The lights cut out for a brief moment, the entire room plunging into darkness. Kara cursed under her breath, and Axel pushed himself up, his heart pounding. "Damn it," Kara gritted, wiping the blood from a cut on her cheek. "They're getting closer. We have to move now." Axel's breath hitched. He knew what she meant. If they didn't get those engines back online soon, Zora's forces would secure the entire ship. The steel dagger was a shadow of its former self, its hull breached in multiple places, its core systems slowly coming back online under the pressure of the attack. "Agreed," Axel said, his voice grim. "Cover me. I'll get the engine systems restored." He moved to the console, fingers racing across the buttons as he tried to regain control. His thoughts kept drifting back to Zora, the woman who had haunted him, who had promised to make him her mate. The battle outside seemed so distant compared to the storm brewing inside his mind. Was she right? Was this bond they shared real? There was a part of him that didn't want to believe it, that wanted to dismiss it as madness. But Zora's presence was like a shadow, looming over him, always pulling him closer. "Captain, we're running out of time," Kara's voice cut through his reverie, sharp with urgency. Axel could hear the sound of Zora's soldiers approaching, their footsteps heavy in the hallway. He pushed the thoughts away and focused on the task at hand. "I know," Axel muttered. "I just need a few more seconds." The console beeped, and finally, the engine systems flickered back to life. The ship groaned as power returned to its core, the low hum of its engines now filling the air. But it wasn't enough. Axel knew that they were still vulnerable, still exposed. "We've got power," he said, breathing a sigh of relief. "But it's going to take more than that to get us out of this. We need to break free from the lockdown protocols before Zora disables us for good." Kara nodded. "Then let's make it quick. I don't think we have much time before she boards this ship personally. Axel stood, eyes scanning the room for any threats, his fingers still working over the console. Zora's soldiers weren't far behind. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. It wasn't just his life at stake. It was the lives of his crew, his ship, and the galaxy's fragile balance that hung in the balance. He couldn't afford to fail. Just as he thought they had a brief moment of respite, the door to the engine room slammed open, and a group of Zora's mercenaries stormed in. Axel instinctively reached for his blaster, but Kara was quicker. She fired a series of precision shots, each one knocking down an enemy soldier before they could react. "Keep them back," Axel shouted, moving toward the secondary console. "I've almost got it." Kara fired again, hitting the last of the intruders, but Axel could see her face tighten. She was running out of ammunition. They both were. "Get ready," Kara warned, her voice low. "They'll be back in full force any second." Axel slammed his palm against the console, sending a final command. The steel dagger's engines roared to life, the ship lurching forward as its systems came back online. Axel's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, it felt like victory, like they had turned the tide. But then, the comms crackled, and the unmistakable voice of Zora Vex cut through the static. "You think you've won, Axel?" she purred, her voice smooth and cold. "I'm only getting started. You may have escaped me once, but I've never been this close." Axel's breath caught in his throat. She was on board. Zora was here. "We're not finished yet, Captain," Kara said, her tone filled with determination. "We can still fight. We still have the advantage." Axel turned to her, his gaze hardening. "No. This is more than just a fight now. This is something else. Zora's not just after our ship, she's after something much deeper. And I'm the key." Kara's eyes narrowed, but she didn't ask further questions. She knew better. Axel's mind was already racing, already calculating the next steps. He had never been good at playing the hero. But against Zora? It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the truth that lingered between them. Axel Cole had fought in more battles than he could count, but nothing in his life had ever felt as intense as this. Zora Vex wasn't just some enemy. She was a force of nature, a hurricane that tore through everything in her path. Her presence loomed like a shadow over the entire steel dagger, and Axel knew that no matter how many times he fought her off, she would always come back. But this time, it wasn't just a fight for survival. It was something far deeper, something that had been bubbling beneath the surface for years. Zora had sworn vengeance on him, and Axel had lived in fear of that day for as long as he could remember. But now, as the ship rocked under the weight of her forces, he realized that the true danger wasn't in her revenge, it was in the bond that had somehow formed between them. Axel paced the command center, the weight of Zora's last words hanging over him. "You're mine, Axel." The words kept playing in his head, echoing through his thoughts like a sick joke. How could she think that? How could she possibly believe that after everything they'd been through? But as much as he wanted to deny it, a part of him, deep down, knew that she wasn't lying. Their paths had crossed too many times, their fates intertwined in ways neither of them had ever anticipated. And now, here he was, caught in a war that wasn't just about survival. It was about something else, something more personal. "You need to make a choice, Captain," Kara's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She was standing near the viewport, scanning the movements of Zora's fleet as it closed in. Zora's closing in fast. We can't outrun her anymore. Axel's chest tightened. He had spent so much time running from her, trying to keep his distance, but now there was nowhere left to go. No more tricks, no more hiding. They were on the verge of a confrontation, and the stakes had never been higher. "I know," Axel said, his voice flat. "I've been running from her for too long, Kara. But this time, there's no running. I have to face her, and I have to face what she's become. Kara turned to him, her brow furrowing. You're not going to do something stupid, are you? Axel gave her a wry smile. I hope not. But I don't have many options left. Just as he spoke, the comms crackled to life, and Zora's voice echoed through the ship, smooth and seductive, as always. I know you can hear me, Axel. I've always been able to find you. It's in your nature to run, to avoid what's inevitable. But you can't outrun this. Axel clenched his fists, his teeth grinding together. You've never understood, Zora. This isn't just about what you want. This is about what's right. I've never belonged to anyone. Least of all you. Zora's laughter filtered through the comms, and Axel could hear the amusement in her voice. Oh, Axel. You've always been so stubborn. But that's part of the charm, isn't it? You don't know it yet, but you're mine. We're bound together, whether you like it or not. Axel's mind raced. He knew she was close. He could feel it. And the worst part was, he knew deep down that she was right. That bond between them was real, and no amount of fighting or running would change that. But the question remained, was he ready to accept it? She's not letting us go, is she? Kara's voice cut through the tension, pulling Axel back to the present. She's going to force this on you. Axel turned to her, his eyes hardening. She's not the only one who gets to make choices. I'm not going down without a fight. Kara nodded. Then let's make it count. We fight together, Captain. No one gets left behind. As the ship lurched again, Axel knew that they were running out of time. Zora wasn't just playing a game anymore. She was coming for him, and this time, there was no escape. But maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to escape. Maybe it was time to face the truth of what had been building between them all these years. The comms crackled again, and this time, Zora's voice was closer, almost as if she were standing right next to Axel. I'm giving you one last chance, Axel. Surrender now, and I promise you won't regret it. I'll show you what it means to be truly united. We can rule this galaxy together. But if you keep fighting me... Her voice turned cold, deadly. I'll make sure you regret it. Axel swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a crushing force. I'm not your pawn, Zora. I've never been anyone's pawn. Zora's silence stretched for a few moments, and Axel wondered if he had finally pushed her too far. But then, her voice returned, this time softer, almost tender. You were never a pawn, Axel, she whispered. You were always the king. Axel felt his breath catch in his throat. What the hell was she talking about? Was she trying to confuse him? Or was this something else? Something deeper? Before he could respond, the lights flickered and the alarms blared once more. Zora's forces were boarding the ship. The time for talking was over. Kara, Axel said, his voice steely, prepare for the worst. And if it comes down to it, we fight until the last breath. Kara gave him a sharp salute. Aye, Captain. We stand with you. Axel moved toward the ship's armory, his mind focused. It was time to confront Zora. And when they met, it wouldn't be as enemies. It wouldn't be as strangers. It would be as something more, something neither of them could fully comprehend. He stepped into the armory, loading up on weapons, preparing himself for whatever lay ahead. He had been fighting Zora for so long, trying to outrun her and the bond they shared. But now, with the ship's hull shaking and her forces closing in, Axel knew the time had come to stop running. The steel dagger wasn't just a ship. It was a battleground. And on this battleground, Axel would face Zora Vex, once his greatest enemy, now his greatest challenge. The only question was, would he survive her claim? The steel dagger trembled under the assault, the ship groaning like a wounded beast as Zora's forces pressed their attack. Axel could feel the weight of every blast, every impact, reverberating through the ship's steel walls. But it was no longer just the physical threat of the attack that had his heart pounding. It was the truth of the situation, the reality that Zora wasn't just trying to kill him, she was trying to bind him to her, to make him hers in ways that terrified him and yet called to him. Axel's hand tightened around the hilt of his blaster as he paced down the corridor toward the bridge. Kara was with him, her expression set in grim determination as she cleared their path. Each step seemed heavier than the last, as if fate itself was pressing down on him, forcing him into a confrontation he could no longer avoid. The lights flickered again, casting long shadows across the hallway as they approached the bridge. The sound of heavy boots echoed in the distance, and Axel knew that Zora's forces were closing in. His mind raced, his instincts screaming for him to prepare for the worst. But beneath the fear, there was something else. A strange, inexplicable pull toward the chaos. He was walking into the lion's den, and yet, something inside him whispered that this was where he was meant to be. This was the moment that would define everything. The door to the bridge hissed open, and Axel stepped inside, blaster raised. The crew was scattered around, working frantically to keep the ship from falling apart. But it wasn't the crew he was concerned with. It was the figure standing at the center of the room. Zora. She was tall, poised, and impossibly beautiful, as always. Her silver hair framed her face like a halo, her violet eyes glowing with a predatory gleam. She stood with an air of absolute confidence, as if the chaos around her was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. But her gaze was fixed on Axel, and he knew that everything between them had led to this moment. Axel, Zora purred, her voice as smooth as silk. I knew you'd come. You always do. He gritted his teeth. I'm not here for your games, Zora. I'm here to end this. She smiled, her lips curling with amusement. You think you can end it? You think you can just walk away from me after everything we've been through? After everything I've done for you? Axel's heart raced. Her words hit him harder than he wanted to admit. Everything she had said, everything she had done, was meant to pull him back to her. But he had to stand his ground. I'm not your puppet, Axel said, his voice low and steady. And I'm not your mate, no matter what you think. Zora's eyes narrowed, and for the briefest moment, Axel saw something flicker behind her controlled demeanor, something raw, something that resembled hurt. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. You still don't understand, she whispered, stepping closer, her voice soft but laced with venom. You think I'm playing games, but this is real. We are connected, Axel. We always have been. He could feel the weight of her words sinking into his chest, like a 1,000-pound stone pressing on his heart. He had tried to deny it, tried to push it away, but now, standing before her, it was undeniable. There was something between them. A connection that he couldn't explain, something that transcended logic, something that pulsed through him like a second heartbeat. Zora was right. They were connected. And for better or worse, Axel knew that nothing could break that bond. Kara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. Captain, we don't have time for this. We need to get the hell out of here, now. Axel turned to her, his expression grim. No. Not until I end this. Zora's lips parted in a mocking smile, and she tilted her head, almost as if she were studying him. End it, Axel? You can't. I told you before, we're bound. And no matter how hard you fight it, you'll never be free. Her words dug into his soul, and for a moment, Axel faltered. The truth of it hit him like a wave. He could feel it, the bond. It wasn't something he could fight, not anymore. It had taken root deep within him, twisted around his heart, and now there was no escaping it. He looked back at Zora, his gaze hardening. I'm not giving in to you. She stepped closer, her breath warm against his skin. Then you'll have to fight me, Axel. Fight me until there's nothing left of you but ashes. Axel's heart pounded in his chest as he drew his blaster and aimed it at her. His finger hovered over the trigger, but the hesitation was there, just a flicker of doubt. The bond. It pulled at him, tempting him to surrender, to let it consume him. Do it, Zora whispered, her voice a low caress. Kill me. Prove to me that you're not the man I think you are. Axel's chest tightened. He had to do something, he had to break the cycle. But as he stared into her eyes, he realized something that sent a shock through his entire being. He didn't want to kill her. He didn't want to be her enemy anymore. He wanted to break the cycle they were caught in. But breaking it meant facing the truth. Axel lowered the blaster. Zora's expression softened for a moment, the hardness in her eyes melting away. You don't understand, do you? She murmured, reaching out to touch his cheek. You were never meant to fight me. You were meant to join me. Axel closed his eyes, feeling the overwhelming pull of the bond between them. It was too strong to ignore, too powerful to break. He opened his eyes, meeting hers. And for the first time in years, he spoke the truth. I can't fight you anymore, Zora. But that doesn't mean I'm ready to surrender. Zora smiled softly, her hand lingering on his face. Then let me help you, Axel. Let me show you that there's more to life than running. Axel's heart pounded as he realized what he had to do. The fight wasn't over, but the battle had changed. Zora wasn't just his enemy. She was something else, something he could never truly escape. And as the ship's lights flickered back on and the stars beckoned from the void outside, Axel made a choice. He would fight, not to destroy Zora, but to understand the bond between them, and to find a way to make it their own.